store their data because they're very powerful tools in taking that raw data, in assisting in taking that raw data and transforming it into information. However, merely the use of relational databases doesn't guarantee that you're going to be successful in this. In order for a relational database to truly be effective, it has to be designed correctly. It has to be set up correctly. And that's where data modeling comes in. If you think about it, almost any important or difficult activity that people are engaged in, it pays when a little bit of planning is done in advance. For example, building a house. You want a house built, the builder isn't simply going to go out to an empty lot and start banging boards together and digging holes for foundations and so on and so forth. All right, the builder is going to have some plans drawn up about what you want, how big you want the living room, how big you want the kitchen, how many bedrooms you want.
I got it on here. Miles, Big Mo wouldn't.
Will help the builder execute that difficult task. Is he going to write a term paper?
Miles is fighting a
It's better to get your
losing
thoughts
battle.
on it and do an outline for it first.
You know why?
For databases, the kind
Because
of
he's
planning that we're
asking
talking
for the
about is
definitions
called
instead
data
of just writing
modeling.
down and looking for
And
the
data
definitions
modeling
later.
involves a few different things, and we'll describe those things.
Well, I have different
I'll take the notes and you do the recordings.
Right? Data modeling is important for a couple different reasons. First of all, it allows the database designer to get their thoughts down on paper before.
Y'all don't shut the hell up,
to
y'all.
think through the problem and make sure that they really have an effective solution to the problem. That's the one thing
Hold on, speak.
that data modeling does. The other thing that data modeling does is it allows them to take the document that's created via data modeling and present it to someone, to communicate that, to help them make sure that everyone understands the data model is going to be created and help to make sure that the data model that's being created is, again, appropriate for the problem that's being solved. So what do we mean by data modeling? By data modeling, we're talking about creating some diagrams that represent what the database is going to look like eventually. You can think of those diagrams as being like an architect's blueprints. All right, there's a number of different notations that can be used. I prefer the simple crow's feet one, where you show different entities in the database connected by lines with crow feet that indicate the cardinality, and we'll come back to the cardinality in a minute, what we mean by the cardinality. So we might have something that looks like this. You can see we have two entities, supplier and product, and the crow's feet indicate that one supplier has many products. A given product is only for one supplier. That's the kind of ERD that I prefer. There are other slightly different notations as well, but essentially they all say the same sort of thing. All right. What does a database designer do when they're performing data modeling? All right. Well, first of all, they talk to a number of different people in the organization. It's important to get everyone's different perspective on the issue before proceeding. It's like the old story that they talk about a series of blind men trying to describe an elephant, and one person says it's like one of the blind people says it's like a tree trunk because they feel the leg of the elephant, and the other one says it's like a rope because they feel the trunk of the elephant, and so on and so forth. Every individual within an organization is going to have their own unique perspective on the organization and the data that's required to run that organization. To really get the whole picture, it's the database designer's job to talk to as many people as possible and then piece everything together into a unified database. Again, remember, one of the key benefits of a database is the fact that everything is integrated. Therefore, you want to take all these different views of the world and of the business of the data and put them together into one cohesive view. Right? And that's the database designer's job. How do they do that? Really, it's sort of like a three-step process. First, the entities are identified in the organization. All right? Secondly, the relationships between those entities are defined. And lastly, the attributes of those entities are defined. Let's talk about each one of these one at a time. All right? First of all, as far as identifying the entities, what the database designer does is talks to the people in the organization, and oftentimes the nouns that people use are the entities. For example, if you were talking to someone that owns an organization, and the person might say something like this: well, our organization has many suppliers. each one of those suppliers supplies us with a set of products. Those products we store in our warehouses, and we have several warehouses. Our customers place orders for those products. Each order can contain many items. And then our sales staff takes those orders and they get billed and shipped to our customers. Well, in that little narrative, in that little, minute and a half narrative or however long it was, if you picked out the nouns that would likely be the entities for that organization's database, what were the nouns that I used? All right, it's going to be a little bit of an English class, right? But what are the nouns I use? Suppliers, products, customers, warehouses, orders, sales reps, and so on down the line. Those become the entities for that organization. And again, you wouldn't just talk to the one person, you talk to several people. And you might even try to find out is someone, or do different people call the same thing by a different name? All right, because that's a possibility as well. All right, so what do you do once you have those? Well, typically what you do is you take out a sheet of paper and you draw each one of those entities in rectangles. So you might draw a rectangle that has supplier written in it, a rectangle that has products in it, a rectangle that shows customers, a rectangle that shows orders, a rectangle that shows sales reps, and so on and so forth. And that's the start of your data model. Okay? Now, once you've identified that, that's the first part, identifying the entities. And again, this can take a long time, depending on how many people you have to talk about in your organization and so on and so forth. After you've identified that, then you need to identify the relationships between the entities. All right? Or the relationship, it's like where there's some kind of link, where there's some kind of connection. For example, you notice even in the verbiage that I use, the supplier supplies many products. All right? In which case, there is a relationship between supplier and product. So you draw a line between them. Products are on orders. Customers place orders. And sales reps are involved in orders. So maybe a first pass at our diagram might look something like that. All right? Now, one thing to keep in mind is there are some relationships which are called derived relationships that you don't show on an ERD because you don't necessarily build them into the database. For example, a customer, you may say, has a relationship with a supplier. The customer buys some of the products that that supplier supplies. Well, that's true. However, that relationship, the relationship between supplier, it's kind of like doing this in a mirror here, the relationship between supplier and customer, you don't show in a database because that relationship is really a relationship that can be derived through these other relationships. The reason the supplier has a relationship with the customer is because that customer places orders for some of the products for that suppliers. So that relationship is there, all right? It doesn't need to be shown directly as a relationship between supplier and customer. This concludes part one of this video. I will then go and record the second part.